Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Mental Corner Podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Bella Paige. Bella is a retired athlete, a brain injury advocate, and the host of the Post Concussion Podcast. Through her work and her advocacy, she doesn't want to just help the individuals that have experienced these brain injuries, but also the friends and families surrounding them. Bella was a lot of fun to talk to, and I really appreciate her coming on and having this discussion with me because personally, I feel like it's a topic that never really gets addressed quite enough. So shout out to Bella. Thank you again for coming on. I had a great time. Also, before this episode starts, and honestly, this point might be a little biased, but if you're not watching Olympic swimming for Canada, then you're really missing out. Shout out to our girls and our guys for just absolutely killing it in the pool. It's been so fun to watch. I find myself screaming at the TV legit every session. There's always something exciting. Not even like Canada is exciting for one, but just everyone as a whole. It's really impressive to just watch athletes come out from this whole pandemic stronger and faster than ever. So shout out to all the athletes at the Olympics, man. I know it's probably hard. I don't know. I'll never get there, but just huge shout out to you for just pulling out these incredible performances. Keep killing it, man. Now, before we get started here, guys, all my fellow listeners know the drill. If you're listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to y'all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. All right, we are live. Bella, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I was reading up about you. You experienced 10 concussions.
That's where I stopped counting. Yes.
Oh my God. So what were you doing when you had these? Were you playing sports or was it kind of like a freak accident?
All of mine were sport related, different sports, but sports. Most of them were from show jumping horses, and then the rest were just kind of really bad luck. Like I got one dancing, snowboarding, snowmobiling. I just was very accident prone growing up.
Yeah, wow. Um and did you feel them after like one or two?
The first few I didn't like the first one I got, I didn't even realize what had happened. And it was a snowboarding accident. And I went to dance the next day. And it was actually my dance teacher who called my parents and was like, "You should probably come get Bella. There's something off about her." And I was
Mm,
like, "Oh," and then like, "Oh, maybe she has a concussion." But that was a long time ago. It was over 15 years ago. And what we know about concussions now compared to then is a really big difference. So I didn't really do much for it. It was just kind of rest and see how you feel in a little while. And that's how I treated the rest of them. And it wasn't until I was 15 that I started to get headaches every single day.
mm-hmm. And is that when you started experiencing that like concussion? Wow, I can't speak. Post concussion syndrome?
Yeah, that's when I consider that it really started because before that, I had had them last like a month or so. A few or one of them had lasted a little longer, but the rest of them seemed to heal quickly and symptom wise.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, no, it's interesting. Like what were the what were kind of the symptoms that you experienced? Because I don't know how old you are, but I'm only 23. But even when I was in high school, like things were so different when we're talking about concussions. Like it was almost glorified to get one when I played rugby. Like
Oh,
guys were
yeah.
like, I want one so bad. And it was just like, yeah, my head hurts and I'm dizzy, but it's whatever. Like no one actually took into account the big impact that it had on your brain.
Yeah, I found the only ones I started to realize and be worried about was after I had started to get headaches every single day.
Mm,
And I'm also 23, so it was about the same. High school, most of my friends, like they had had a concussion because they were athletes, but they didn't really deal with like the long-term symptoms that some people get. And they were all like, "Oh yeah, well, you'll be okay. Like that was the common. There was just no thought. We just got told to like go sleep, rest it off, and then you'll be good in a week kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was it. Eh? It was like, yeah, sleep's the best medicine. Go shrug, like go brush it off. It's like, well,
Yeah, stay in the dark.
yeah, that's a great idea. It's like,
Mhm.
well, actually, I don't feel great though. Um, so what was like the deciding factor for you to finally get help in terms of your concussions?
So I started noticing the headaches, and then I actually moved away. I was living away from home a lot. I was living in Florida at the time when I noticed they were like not going away. And I kind of kept just pushing it off in my head and going, oh, it's just from getting up at like 5, 6 in the morning every day, riding horses all day, going to bed really late, and just exhaustion, right? It was 4 months of that. And I just kept being like, oh, I'm exhausted. It's from the heat, it's from being tired. And that's why my head hurts all the time. And then I moved home to finish up school for a bit, and then I moved away again. And this time I started to notice I couldn't sleep anymore. I was up until like 4 in the morning, but I wasn't living with my parents. So, and my like family that I was living with, they all went to bed early. So I just hung out till like 4 in the morning all the time. And I couldn't sleep. And then there was one day at a horse show where I got off after completing a round, and round went great. And then I almost passed out. And my best friend caught me, and I was like, "Whoa, maybe there is something wrong here." I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
it's just the heat. It's just the heat." Like something I kept doing was brushing it off. And then by the time it was to go back to school, I usually went a little later. So like mid September, end of September. Yeah, I think it was September. So October is when the season had stopped. And that's when all the adrenaline rushes from riding horses 6 days a week and competing almost every week went away.
Mm,
And that's when everything it was like walking into a brick wall. Like, all of a sudden, all my symptoms were exacerbated. I couldn't go to school. I had to almost drop out. I got told to drop out by doctors. I couldn't get out of bed. I could barely walk. I couldn't eat. And all of a sudden, just losing that adrenaline rush that I needed to keep going just kind of caught up with me. And then I was unable to do anything really. And that's when I started getting help.
yeah, it's oh my goodness. So like all your distractions were gone and your brain's like,
Yeah.
"Hey, by the way, you've been dealing with this the whole time.
Time. Yeah.
Surprise." Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, it's like, I I have a like I don't I'm trying to it's so hard to like for people to understand if you've had a concussion or not just because you can't see it
No.
like it's the same as mental health like you break a leg or you bruise a bone like that's all visible.
Mhm.
But like with a concussion you just like hey like I think something's wrong with my head and they're like well you're standing you're walking you're fine. Well it's so hard to like identify. I think
Mhm.
that's the problem.
Yeah, I had trouble with that in high school. I had to have my mom actually had to come in with me and vouch for me with like the principal and all this stuff because I had a teacher trying to kick me out because in Ontario you have to be in school for so many hours to be considered a student, and I was
Hmm.
way under those hours, but all my work was done, and he just didn't like me. So I was like, he was trying to kick me out and remove me from school, and my mom had to be like, no, she's not okay. And he's like, well, when she comes to class she seems fine. I'm like, well, I know I seem fine, but I'm not.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's one of those things. It's mental health concussions. It's like, well, it goes deeper than the visual.
Mhm.
Um, so what like what kind of started or yeah, no, sorry. Wow. What kind of started your podcast, your platform? What made you like convert all of your experiences into what you have now?
Well, it started in I actually just started it in January, but I was I hit a really low spot 2 years ago, and then I went to go compete again full time with show jumping because that was supposed to be like my career. As of 14 years old, I got told by coaches that this is all you're doing for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
So then I went to go try again because I had graduated university. And I was like, well, it's time to just start again. Let's try. And I lasted a month. And then my headaches were so bad. I was almost over a bucket after every time I rode. And then a year later, COVID had set. And I was like, well, I want to help people, but how? How
Mhm.
do I do it? And I wanted to start with like a blog. And my brother was like, well, you listen to podcasts all the time. Why don't you start a podcast? And it took a lot of convincing for me to start because it's not really my personality to, I like to talk, but it wasn't something I thought of recording my voice and putting it out to the world to listen
Right.
to.
Yeah.
But eventually I bought my equipment and I think it took me another like 4 months to record my first episode. And like I'd like play with it and talk into it, but it took quite a while to actually get to that point.
Yeah, it's just all still in the box. You're like, "Ah, I don't know if I want to do this." Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. I'm kind of the same way in the sense where I've always hated how my voice sounded.
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't know if I want to put this voice out there for people to listen to. I don't think they want to, but it looks like you're doing really well. And I think the surprising thing is that like, you have all these guests come on, which I think just shows like how common it is to have brain injury, have concussions, have like it was always that weird thing where someone got a concussion and they were just different from everyone. It was like, whoa, that's crazy. How'd you hit your head that hard? It's like, well, sometimes it doesn't even take that much. Most people in sports experience a concussion, and people just don't
Yeah.
know that. People just identify it with football.
Yeah, they identify it with football, hockey, and then they forget about car accidents, the military, slips and falls, and just everyday life. One of my guests got one from a party, like someone threw a beer can and hit her. Like, like fluke. I had a guest who walked into a glass wall at the office because she was like really busy and just like powering out and didn't even notice. So it can really happen at any time, anywhere. And the news is really good at focusing on sports and forgetting about everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. You think like CTE and traumatic brain injury or just sports, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh when you said walking through a glass wall, but
It's okay.
that's
She laughs
just
about it too.
she does. Okay, that's good. I don't feel
Yeah.
as bad anymore. But it's crazy, like little things like that. The brain is so well, it's mushy. It's like so sensitive. Like
Yeah.
anything can do it. So, what do you think needs to be done in regard to the way we look at brain injuries or the way we, approach them in terms of recovery?
Well, the first thing that has come out in the last 5 years, a lot more than the last 10, is how fast you should actually start therapy. A lot of
Mm,
people wait until it's like a few months later and they're still dealing with symptoms where they've proven that you should probably start after the first 2 days. And it definitely improves your chances of getting better. So that's a big thing. Another big thing is a lot of people don't believe you because they can't see it. So that part's really hard. I really push therapy as like psychological therapy
mhm.
with a therapist on people because they don't realize the physical symptoms are affecting their mental health. So I try to push that really hard because it's usually a few years down the road of physical therapy. Someone's like, oh, wow, I'm really not doing well mentally. And then they start therapy, and it's like, oh, wow, I really would have needed this. Like, it would have made a big difference in my life.
Yeah, yeah, you're like, "Wait a minute, there's like 4 years of unresolved injury here that I
Yeah.
gotta take care of." So, how were you do you do you still experience symptoms with your brain injury?
I do. They're a lot more limited compared to what they used to be.
Mhm,
Now I have like some sensitivity to light and sound. And then otherwise, I'm pretty good. I get headaches, but I usually know what caused them. Like the
mm.
podcast has definitely caused headaches because sometimes I spend hours on computer screens now.
Yes.
And then I can get them from eating certain foods, like sugar really triggers them. And then, like, if I push myself too hard one day, I kind of know. So I can usually keep my symptoms down pretty low now.
And what got you to get to that point? Like what kind of tips and tricks worked?
Not what I did.
Oh.
So, well, I did a lot of therapy, like physical therapy. I did things from acupuncture, hyperbaric oxygen chambers,
Mm,
and I did massage therapy, laser therapy, like there's a whole list. It's actually kind of insane how much different things I tried just to get better. So I never
yeah.
know what was the right answer because I tried so many things at once. But learning triggers really helped me, learning what I could do and couldn't do. And then also telling myself the truth was a big thing for me because I just kept lying to myself. I moved across the country to go ride horses for the first year of university and told everyone I was doing great, but I still had a headache every single day.
Mhm.
And it was accepting that having a headache every single day of your life isn't normal, there's something wrong, and things like that. But it definitely took me time was a big factor for sure, and just all the combination of every therapy I could try, really. Visual therapy is also very helpful to most.
Visual as in like the eye movements or yeah, yeah, I just had someone come on talk about that. That's so fascinating.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really complicated.
I don't get it. And I was in science. I wish I could say, yeah, yeah, that makes sense, but I was like, sure. Yeah, and it's unfortunate that like too many of us settle in terms of like with you were like oh, I just have headaches every day. Like that's just who I am. That's how my life's going to go. And too many of us just settle for that as opposed to going, hey, maybe this isn't right. Like I was the same way with my mental health was like, I'm just going to be sad forever. That's just what it is. I'm just going to hate how I look. I'm going to hate myself forever. That's just who I am. And too many of us go through that. Not enough people take that next step.
Yeah, I had the mental health. I remember I had a headache every day for about 7 years of my life.
Hmm.
And for the first 3, they were so extreme that I couldn't do anything, or I would ride. I probably shouldn't have, but for some reason on a horse, I didn't feel the pain. I just felt it when I got off.
Yeah.
And but I had a headache, yeah, every single day, and extreme painful headaches. They are worse than anything I've ever had in my life. I get something called cluster headaches now, which are actually considered suicide headaches by most health places.
Mm.
And my concussion headaches hurt more. And I remember going, how am I ever going to be happy with a headache every single day of my life? And it took me a long time to kind of get over that.
Yeah. How do cluster headaches work? Is it just like a more intense sensation?
Yeah, they are from like nerves up in your neck. And then it's usually around one of your eyes. And it honestly feels like someone punched you in the face. Like you have a really big black eye, but
Mm.
there's nothing there when you look at it. And the first time I got a few of them, I thought that I personally like hit myself in the face in my sleep
Oh
or
my God.
something. And I remember telling my partner, I was like, "Did you hit me? Like, are you sure you didn't like hit me in your sleep?" And it was like a month where I was like, "You must be like punching me or something," and I'm not noticing because my head, like, I'd be waking up with like this sensation that I had a black eye, and then I learned what they were, but they're painful, but compared to the extreme concussion headaches that I dealt with before, they're a lot better to deal with.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Mhm.
So is that like we don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but is that kind of where the suicidal thoughts kind of started creeping in with all that pain?
No, I'm good with talking about it. I talk about it all
Okay,
the time.
sweet.
So, the mental health stuff was really bad the first 2 years. The first year, it was from quitting show jumping was actually my big thing because I was on track, like, I had won overall champion in my division out of, like, 100 to 200 people each year,
Hmm.
and I was doing really well and I was moving up, and, like, the next 10 years of my life were planned, like, overly planned, where I was gonna be in the winter, the summer, every year, which shows, when to buy more horses, that kinda thing. So having that taken away, like, crushed me, and it crushed me for a really long time, so that was where a lot of the mental health stuff came from, because I'd be like, I had to actually close down my social media for a while because even I was trying to be happy for my friends who are still going, moving up and competing, watching it was really painful for me because I couldn't do anything all of a sudden. And then, so that was a lot of it. And then I was doing really bad then. Like I had done the suicidal notes in my drawer for every single person in my family. And I was like, I'm done. Like I can't do this anymore. And somehow I just kept going. And it wasn't until I guess it was 3 years ago now. 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I didn't notice. So now I have something, I call it my mental health trigger, is when I
Hmm.
start running. When I run, there's something wrong. Because I actually really don't like running. I'm a very active person, but there's something about running that is not for me.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my mom runs marathons, but
Oh,
I don't
geez.
run. And I've noticed that every single time in my life where I've been really stressed out, I start running. And so the time that I didn't really realize, I actually thought I was doing really well. And then I started running every day, almost 3 times a day.
Hmm.
And I was just running and running and running. I was like, I'll just go for a run because I think it's because it was so painful. It would like turn off my thoughts.
No. Yeah.
And I would just run and listen to like crazy music. And then all of a sudden, I was in a hospital room with my family around me, and they were looking at me like because I had seemed okay. I had seemed really mentally ill the years before. And I hadn't realized that it was all still there. All the thoughts were still there. Just I was pushing them down every day. And eventually they just kind of all came up at once. And
Mm.
then I was actually put into mandatory therapy. And that is what got me to go to therapy because all of the times before that, I had only ever done one session and I was like, nope, don't like them, never going again. And my mom would be like, great, okay, well, let's try to find another one. And I was a really stubborn person growing up, especially as a teenager. So I started mandatory therapy. And luckily, I really liked the woman who was my therapist. And it made a really big difference because I had like the spiraling thoughts that didn't stop. Like I'd be driving down the road and be like, why don't you just drive off? Like, why are you living like this? You're in so much pain. Like you can't keep doing this to yourself. Nothing's getting better. And then your brain just keeps going and going and going. And you'd be like, why don't you just crash? Like, why wouldn't that just be easier? And then I was taught how to make those stop or at least calm them down to the point where I could like carry on with my day. And that definitely helped save my life.
Yeah, definitely. It's so important to like your therapist
It
because
is.
I've had it where like the person across from me, I'm sitting there in the entire session, I'm like, I do not like you. Like that's the
Yeah.
only thought going through my mind. It's like I don't like you, I don't trust you, I'm not telling you anything. It's so important to find someone you click with.
Mhm. Yeah, I really liked her. She was like older and we just got along. I had seen, I don't quite a few before, actually
Yeah.
sporadically over time, but one of the things a lot of them would do is they just tell me what to do right away. Like,
Mm,
why don't you just stop writing? Why don't you just stop doing this? And I just didn't take it well that way. Like, instead of telling me what I should do, she gave me tools to carry on with what I was doing and then live happier. So it made a big difference for me.
mhm. Oh, that is so much better. When people,
Yeah.
I'm sure you're the same because you actually mentioned it. You said you were stubborn. I'm the
Yeah.
same way. When people told me what to do in terms of recovery for mental health, I was like, I'm gonna do the exact opposite. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way I'm doing what you're telling me to. I don't care who you are.
Mhm.
But definitely finding like different tools to give their patients. That's so much better,
Yeah.
man.
I really liked I have 2 favorites, and one of them is when you pick a word, and usually I use the word like think, and you spell it forwards and backwards in your brain, and then you write the letters in your brain in the sky and then backwards, and it
Hmm.
kind of just calms down my brain. Or another one is you pick an object in front of you and you describe it from like the big details to the small details. And that really helped me be able to like ground myself and be like, okay, we're doing good, we can carry on.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because sometimes, like, when you're in that state, you just nothing, you don't focus or care about anything but that thought. Like, because I also experienced suicidal thoughts, and like whenever I was like, "Oh, I could jump off this bridge or I could run into this road," like nothing else mattered. It could have been the best day ever. I could like have so many things going on, but that was the only thing I focused on. But if you just take a second to step back and focus on something else, then it helps a lot.
Yeah. And I find something people don't always realize is after I had attempted suicide, I was really angry when I was like, I guess when my eyes finally woke up. I felt like really numb for
Mhm.
about like probably 2 weeks to a month. And I was just kind of like floating through life because all of a sudden I was like babysat because my family wouldn't leave me alone. So I was like, I wasn't allowed to drive to the barn by myself. So to see my horses, they had to drive me. And if I
Oh,
wanted to do anything, they were there. And it was just like they were being very protective. Like I'm one of
right.
four, have very close siblings, and my parents are very protective. So that was my life for a few weeks. And then finally they were like, okay, like you can take your vehicle. I'm like, thank you. Like,
I'll be taking that.
but I was just, yeah, like I remember I was so mad at them. And now that I look back, they really helped me. But I was just like, they kept doing it. And I'm glad they did because I was like, nope, don't want to be here. I don't know. Like, you're trying and I'm just numb. Like, stop asking me how I am. And I just, like, I remember doing a lot of puzzles because I needed to do something.
Mhm.
And it took me a while to get through that. It was about a month or two after that I started to feel more like normal and like myself.
Yeah, it takes a little bit to get there.
Mhm.
A lot of us look for that quick fix.
Yeah.
It's just like at the end of the day, you're not going to get a quick fix.
No, it wasn't this. Some people are like, you didn't just be like, oh, I'm so thankful I'm alive. I'm like, no, that's not, that's not what happened. Like, really hope that happens to some people, but that's not how my brain was working at the time.
Yeah, no, I didn't just wake up the next day like, "Oh my god, I just had an epiphany." It's like, no, that's not.
Yeah,
It
no,
took like
didn't know.
months.
Not like that.
Yeah, no, definitely not. So, going back to your family, if there are, either parents or siblings or even friends listening who have a member of the family that experiences like the concussion symptoms or experience like suicidal ideologies, what was the best thing for you in that situation?
Well, they all handled it differently.
Mhm.
I think the combination of all of their personalities helped. My dad was kind of scary because I don't think he understood mental health at all.
Right.
And to have his daughter all of a sudden have mental health problems, it was kind of like a big shock for him. So he was really sad, like overly like, what can I do to help you? Like, I'll do anything. My mom was probably mad at me because I didn't tell her and we're really close.
Mhm.
And she was like that protective one that I wouldn't say I hated her, but I felt like I did. But she probably helped me the most because she was always like, "How are you doing?" And like she was the one checking up on me constantly. And I'm thankful for it now. Can't say I was thankful for it then
Mhm.
because then I was just annoyed. You kind of just are irritated by everyone. But if you are that person, just keep doing it because it is helping, even though it might not feel like it. My youngest sister didn't know what to say or do because it was kind of just a shock. And my oldest sister's a nurse, so then she just like lectured me because I had a niece at the time. Now I have more, but at the time she was like, I cannot believe you were gonna like leave her, right? Like that was a big no
Mhm.
no. And she was like, I can't believe you. Like, what was I supposed to explain? Like that kind of thing because I'm like it's a big part of her life. I see her almost every day. And then my brother was actually probably the one who hit me the hardest personally because he's not an emotional person. So I think seeing someone in your family who's not emotional become emotional, it was really hard on you because you realize what you did and how you were going to hurt. Like you, at the time, you don't really realize maybe how much it's really going to influence your family until after.
Mm.
And even when you are like awake in there, just seeing all their faces being like, I can't believe like you were going to actually leave. And it was a really hard thing for them to accept and go through. But yeah, the constant badgering was like, honestly, it's helpful. Like there's a point of it being too much, but it's okay to check in on people. And it's also really okay to push people to go to therapy, because I find a lot of people that I talk to, they started going when somebody helped them set it up,
Mm.
because they're not going to research into therapists and call, and then like that whole phase of it is sometimes really hard for people. So having someone else do that for them has made a big difference.
Yeah, it's one thing to sit there and tell someone to go. It's another thing to like hold their hand and go with them.
Yeah, and find the therapist that they should go see, and find another one if it doesn't work out, because when you're not mentally doing well, it's really hard to do all that for yourself.
It gets overwhelming for sure.
Yeah.
There's like you gotta Google it, and that alone is enough. And then you
Yeah.
gotta find the right one, and then some don't work, and paying for it, and blah blah
Mhm.
blah. It all piles up. So, yeah, having that person there to walk with you is that it's a game changer, really.
Yeah, I got mandatory, but it was very
Right?
convenient that everything was set up and I just had to go there every single week
Yeah. Right.
and not think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. Shoot, I was gonna. Oh yes, I remember my question. I forget all the time. It's really embarrassing. But so you go through all of this, you have those 10 concussions, and then you stop counting, and then you experience those 8 years of post concussion syndrome, and then along the way you have these suicidal ideologies and all of these things. What is it going to take for us to not experience that anymore? Because if you like, I was looking it up, and I got to find the stat here. Sorry, I'm not smart enough to have this off the top of my head. But like, one of the leading causes of like traumatic brain injuries in kids like 5 to 19 is sports. Or like, you hit your head with the soccer ball, you hit your head in football, rugby. Like, I was a swimmer, so you hit it off someone else's head or the wall. If you're I don't know how you would do that, but you would
You
find a
could
way.
screw up. Yeah.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, exactly. You can screw up. It's a thing. So what's it going to take for us to get to a point where all these cases similar to yours are kind of minimized?
I think for the sports side of things, one of the biggest things that we have to push is making kids take a break at
Mm,
an early age. Because if you get a concussion when you're maybe 7 or 8 years old, maybe 10, and they tell you, okay, like you don't have to stop doing everything, but you need to be out of the game to lower your risk, because subconcussive impacts are really dangerous. And you can, still do practices, just maybe change it up for the safety of you, right? Like minimize the risk and carry on your life and do therapy and such. But take the break, because if you take a break when you're 10, then if it happens when you're 16 and 17, it's like, oh, it's normal to take a break off from sports, like to take a month off or two to kind of do rehab and get better. Because the biggest problem with athletes is we don't take it
hmm.
and we just keep going and we just ignore it. And like you see it even in the pros, like somebody's out with a concussion and then they're say back on the ice in the next game and you're like, what? Like
Yes.
how
Yeah.
did that happen? But if it becomes normalized as a child, then it's not such a big deal when you get older, because you're like, this is just part of the game. If I get hurt, I take a break. Because it's not like where if you break your ankle and you get put in a cast for 6 weeks, you're forced to take a break.
Hmm.
Where when you have a head injury, brain injury, whether it's from the sport or maybe you got in a car accident, nobody can see it. So you can keep going. Like I just kept riding. I rode for years, and it's really easy to hide because nobody can see it. So you just suffer in silence. And that's a really big problem.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if you watch hockey. I'm a casual fan, but like with John Tavares, he like in
Is that
game.
the head hit with the knee?
Yes, yes, for the
Okay.
Leafs, he got knocked, and like the guy went limp. And
Hmm.
then the next day or the day after, he was at the game watching. I was like, weren't you like borderline dead in
Yeah.
game one? Like, shouldn't you be resting, man?
Yeah, I heard he might have been on the ice again or something, and I don't follow, sports because I have a really hard time watching them now.
Mm.
After all the head injuries, I just cringe, like, football makes me cringe, boxing makes me
Oh,
cringe. Like, I support people doing sports, but I have a really hard time watching it, but I did watch that because on social media, I follow, like, concussion and all that kinda stuff, and a lot of my friends send me them now because they're like, "Whoa, did you see that?" 'Cause it's, like,
that's
my
so
whole
rude.
business, it's my career now, right? So,
Yeah.
the thing is, I think he was back on the ice, and it's, like, the playoffs or something right now, right?
Hmm.
I'm, like, not a sport person in
How
all
do
of
you
them.
not know? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah.
know, but, like, I should know my brother-in-law's, like, huge. They all wear their jerseys, like, for
Mm.
hockey night, but I know as an athlete, I get it at some point. Like, there was also an NFL player who kept going after a concussion, and you could obviously see in his performance that it went down in the last Super Bowl, but I get there's 2 sides of it. One of it is those sports are really bad for kinda just brushing it off, but people forget that so are athletes. Like,
Mm.
if I worked up my whole entire career to go to the Super Bowl, I would have told you to just go away if you told me to stop because I had a concussion. Like, I'm at the Super Bowl, it's like for me, I was supposed to go to the Olympics, so if I got a concussion the week before the Olympics, even now, I probably would have told you to go away, even though I
Yep.
know it's the wrong thing to do. Like, of course, it's the wrong thing to do. You need a break, like, you could suffer for years to come because of this. But when you're competitive and say you're in the top, you're at the end of the season, like, energies are high, adrenaline's high, to step back and watch your teammates or watch someone else in your place feels like it'd probably be nearly impossible, so I get that part. But the coaches and things, like, they're the people who should be like, "No, we're not letting you because we're protecting you because you can't mentally protect yourself right now."
Yeah, there should definitely be like proper training for coaches in terms of like how to identify concussions or just kind of notice like, hey, you're kind of off
Yeah.
today. Like,
Yeah, and they should make the decision for you because as an athlete, you're not gonna make it because you're gonna choose to be on the ice or in the game or whatever it is because you've trained your whole life to be there. So to step back, why would you? So that's where, like, the health professionals, athletic trainers that are there, they should be like, "No, we're not letting you. Like, you can be angry at us, but don't be angry at yourself," kinda thing.
yeah, definitely. And when things happen like that, it's athletes are funny, man, because like you get that injury and it's not your fault. It's like a freak hit or a freak accident and you just blame yourself and you're like, "Oh, I should have seen that freak accident coming, that 1 in a million thing coming." But like, I mean, how do you prevent that? So it's important to have someone go like, "Hey, don't be mad at yourself." That's great. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Man, it's so funny because, we're talking about like the Super Bowl and the playoffs and the Olympics, but kids like when they're 10, they feel like their playoffs are the
No,
Olympics.
it is the same thing, like, you get
Yeah.
just as competitive. I was 15, 16, and I was definitely not in the Olympics yet, but I was told, like, that's the plan, and you weren't getting me to stop. There was no way.
Yeah, no, not a chance. I when I played rugby in high school, and there's tons of stories where it's like, "Hey man, maybe you shouldn't have played that game." But like in our quarterfinals of our regional meet, like the
Yeah.
smallest of the small, I like couldn't walk because someone had tackled me. Um like he broke his shoulder on my thigh when he tackled me, and so my back was shot, destroyed, and this isn't a concussion story, but like I had to get carried off the field. And then the next game, my physio was like, "Don't you dare step anywhere near that field." And I was like, "But it's the quarterfinal."
Yeah,
And so I
right.
got, I got on the court, and my coach didn't say. My coach is like, "Great, like our starting player is there. That's perfect." And then one hit, and I had to crawl off.
Yeah.
It's like you will not get me off that field or that out of that pool. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's where, like, parents and coaches and the people who are in charge should be making the decisions for you because you're not going to make the right one.
No, definitely not. Especially with all that adrenaline pumping.
Mhm.
Oh, you make some dumb decisions, man. Uh, um, yeah, I actually before this episode started, and this goes back to proper training and proper knowledge on the whole thing. I think you retweeted it, but it was that thing where it said like hitting your head with things in sports is probably not a good thing, so we have to make sure we do it as safely as possible. What?
Yeah, there's I have a problem with a lot of it. Like I think hockey when I watch them like after that hit, a fight had started because one of the players got mad at him for hitting.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's so unnecessary. Like now we're just adding head injuries to the party. Like, like okay, somebody just got one, so let's make more. Like that just like makes my brain like spin. And it's the nature of the sport, as people tell me, but nature changes, so we can change it. And now they're trying to change it with kids because like I had said with the break thing, because if it's you change it with kids, then as they grow up, eventually you'll have players that aren't doing that because it's out of their habit, it's out of their nature.
Hmm.
Because getting people to change when they've been doing it for 20, 30 years is really difficult. It's like, don't hit with your head. And they're like, what? Why wouldn't I hit with my head?
Yep.
It's like, well, because like the damage that you're doing to your brain, but getting those habits out is really hard to do.
Oh, it's impossible. Even like especially when you get to the pro level, you've got like years of repeating. Like for swimming, to get if you were on the university team, to get a bad habit that you learned when you were like 15 out of your stroke, you couldn't do it. It was impossible. It's ingrained in you.
Hmm.
So that's teaching kids young to go like, hey man, don't use your head as a hitting tool.
So,
That's
weapon.
yeah, it's not a weapon, man. You can use everything else, just not your head.
Well, and it's the one organ you can't protect it because your helmet, like helmets are essential. They prevent and help prevent from traumatic brain injuries, but a concussion is how your brain moves within the skull. And
Yeah.
that happens anyways. So like you can't protect it. So why are we using it as a weapon?
Oh, even just thinking about the head moving, ugh, God, like ugh, it's so uncomfortable to think about the little squishy brain moving around in your skull. Ugh, man, yeah, it's well, I hope it changes. I mean, I think it will. I think people are starting to realize, that this is a serious thing. Um, I mean, and it's great. Like, we're the same age and you experienced it. Like high school, no one cared.
Yeah.
No one could give less of a crap about what a concussion was. Even like 5, 4, 3 years ago, it was like, Will Smith had that one movie about
Yeah.
football or something, and everyone was like, whoa.
Well, that
And that
was
was
about
it.
the discovery of CTE with
Yeah.
Dr. Amalu, who like was the one who actually discovered it and claimed that this is an issue
Hmm.
within athletes at the time. And it it becomes bigger in some worlds, but it's still really small. Like if you compare the amount of healthcare and providers who are like designated to say concussions or brain injuries, and then you compare it to the amount of brain injuries that actually occur every year, just let alone in North America, it's such a small percentage and disconnect that it's almost damaging. Like how and scary that there's all these people who are not getting help because they don't even know how to start and where to go.
Yeah. No, there's like such a lack of knowledge in terms of resources.
Mhm.
So how do we get those resources out more
So
accessible?
people are working on it. There's lots of foundations, podcasts, businesses, those kinds of things. They're working on getting them through a lot of like protocols. Like in Canada, to be a registered coach for most sports, there's a concussion protocol training that you have to go through on the internet. It's like really short. It's videos, you click through them. But at least it's something. They're working on it, they're trying. And it's just about talking about it. Like we talk about mental health is invisible, concussions are invisible. There's tons of students in high school, and even I've had some parents talk to me about their kids in elementary school, which to me is like a whole nother level of stress and scariness.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to get them help because they have a hard time doing it. And university is way easier to get help in than high school for some reason, because university is set up for you to have accommodations and things like that, where most high schools aren't, and they should be on the same level. And it's just about talking about it, getting it out there, and being open about it. I find people are like, oh, you got a concussion, and then they never talk about it again. And then they suffer in silence because a lot of people that I talk with, they're like, oh, well, my friend asks how I'm doing, and I tell them the truth. And they're like, well, wasn't that a year ago? They're like,
Mm.
yeah, it's a year ago and I'm still struggling. And that part is really hard for people because they look at them and they're like, you're still not okay. Like, you look fine, but they are still struggling. They might struggle for a few more years even then.
Yeah, people just assume that it's going to heal like a cut or a bruise.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, I think. I think also, like, you know, the person who is experiencing it a year after is like, man, I'm still not good.
Yeah, I find a lot of people, either there's the people who have a ton of concussions, and then there's one that often is like, this one concussion completely changed my life. I didn't pay attention to the rest, and now I'm really struggling. And then they struggle for years. Or then there's the people who have never had a concussion in their life, and they get one, and 5 years later, they're still dealing with symptoms. Because that's the other thing about the brain is it doesn't matter if you watch two people hit their heads and you're like, wow, that one looked way more severe to the other one. That doesn't mean that one's going to suffer more or less than the other, because we don't know enough about the brain or why that happens. But there's no proof to be like, that big giant car accident is going to cause years of damage to someone versus that little car accident where somebody got maybe rear-ended and they got whiplash,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're suffering for years. Like, we don't know enough, so that makes it really difficult to understand.
Yeah, and research is moving along, right? I feel like that's a main topic right now.
Yeah, it's getting there. I would say, like, I was talking to someone else, and compared to where it should be, it's really far behind. Like, compared
Mm.
to, say, like Alzheimer's research or other brain related diseases, injuries, we're probably like 10 to 20 plus years behind those people.
Yeah, that's unfortunate
Mhm.
because like those brain injuries lead to those things.
Yep.
So like, just get to the root cause, man.
It's a hard thing to understand. Like, I went to a national sports conference on concussions, all with neurologists and top scientists of the world. And one of my favorite speakers stood up and said, well, to start, we don't know that much. And it's true. Like, when you think of how complex the brain is and how everybody's is different, it's hard
Mm.
to do studies because, well, number one, it's your brain. So you can't like just analyze it that easily. And the other thing is, it's all opinion based. Like, you can't measure, you can kind of measure how someone is doing better, but someone can tell you they feel a lot better, but like their pain level might be different. Their life circumstances, if you have kids, noise sensitivity, going to be a big issue. If you live alone and it's a quiet life, maybe you don't even notice that you have it. So like things like that make it really hard for them to research.
Yeah, all the varying different symptoms. It's ridiculous.
Mhm.
It's like, how do you even pinpoint? It's like, even with mental health, it's like, yeah, you might feel sad, you might be overly happy, you might be
Yeah.
like, it's like the spectrum is like insanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully, you know, they figure it out. I mean, I will never figure it out because I don't have the tools, but I hope that the people looking into it do. Um, for, in regards to your podcast, where
Yep.
can people find you?
For sure. So all of my information in the podcast is on postconcussioninc.com. Otherwise, the Post Concussion Podcast is on every single streaming service and people can find it there.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I'll put all those links down below because I think this is, a lot more common than people think, like concussions. And I think people experience symptoms without even realizing it. So, you know, resources like yours where people can like share their stories and you can share your story. I think that's super important for people to go, hey, wait a minute. That sounds like something I had.
Yeah.
So I love what you're doing. And thank you again, Bella, for not only sharing your story, but for sharing it on my platform. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on.
And to all my viewers, I will see you guys next time.